to the power sector 1 week after the new tariff regime, which increased electricity tariff by 231% for Category A consumers. Stakeholders say there are indications that the electricity supply capacity is grossly inadequate to meet the 20 hours per day minimum benchmark for the new tariff, while accommodating other categories of consumers. The 11 electricity distribution companies operating in the electricity sector were yesterday allocated just 3,236 megawatts, thus constraining them from delivering a minimum of 20 hours of power supply to consumers under Band A nationwide. Investigations show that this has been the average supply before the tariff hike, and no improvement has been made since the new tariff came into force last week. The new multi-year tariff order, which raised electricity rates for about 2 million customers by 231% to 255 naira per kilowatt from 68 naira per kilowatt, has been running under power generation stranded at 4,200 megawatts in the past 7 days. And now to discuss this, we are joined by Temitope Kolade, Senior Manager and Lead ESG and Climate Change Services at Andersen. Thank you so much for joining us, Temitope Kolade, on the news.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
So how do you interpret the discrepancy between the increased electricity tariff and the reported inability to meet the minimum benchmark of 20 hours per day of power supply?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. For me, it's not unexpected. Nothing much has changed from when, and like you said in your report, nothing much has changed from when we didn't have a tariff increase to when we now have a tariff increase. So the tariff increase in itself doesn't do the job, right? The question we should be asking really is whether we have facilities in terms of transmission or generation or even distribution that have been upgraded since that time, and whether that would lead to more efficient services from the distribution companies as it were. In my view, nothing much has changed, and we shouldn't have expected any much difference from the services that we're going to provide after the increase in tariff.
Well, you just questioned the fact that we don't have enough facility on ground to generate, transmit, and distribute power across households and those that may need it. And we know that gas is one of those critical facility or infrastructure, liquid infrastructure that is needed. Now, we have shortage on gas. A lot of money has been pumped into the power sector over a couple of years, but then we've not seen results. Why is it that there's a gap between what has been invested into the power sector and the fact that there's even a shortage on gas and other factors that might be impeding the possibility of having adequate supply to those that are in need?
Okay, thank you very much. I think gas is one thing, and then we have to look at the generators themselves. When you visit the generating companies, as a matter of fact, what you would see are gas turbines and lots of very huge generators that generate just like the generators that you have at home, but they are very huge in terms of sizes. And so it's one thing to look at, the gas in itself. It's another thing to look at the physical infrastructure to generate and, of course, to transmit. And then you now start talking about the distribution. But let's stay with gas. Gas in itself, we know that we've not done so much of oil and gas investment in the last couple of years in Nigeria, again, because the environment has not been exactly conducive for investors. And as such, because there is not so much significant investment in the oil and gas sector, that also impacts on whether we're able to get gas. That's on the one side. The other side is that even when you then produce gas, you typically have forward contracts. So people buy ahead of time, even before you produce. You've got to buy, you've got to have off-takers, right? So it's not necessarily when you need the gas that you then begin to have people that would say, oh, I need the gas, come and buy. So it's not so much about the spot buying. Right. So that's another thing. So the question is whether the GenCos already had people who were going to supply them ahead of time. That's one thing. Then the other is to even think about the generators themselves, the huge generators that require so much of investments to put them into place. All right. Even though there are some investments going on here and there, but we've not seen that concerted effort again, because it's a case of whether you put the cat before the horse, or the horse before the cat. Do we have the money to run? Liquidity is one major problem within the sector. And when you don't have that liquidity, you are unable to invest into those certain facilities that would ensure that we have the sort of generation that we need. So much of that we have not also seen. And so you couldn't have expected so much difference between when the tariff has been increased and when we now say, oh, yes, maybe there is a bit of money coming from consumers, right?
So we've talked about the gencos. Let's look at the discourse now. How might the allocation of megawatts to different distribution companies affect their ability to meet the minimum benchmark for power supply?
Okay, again, when we track back, not so much has changed from what was being allocated to these distribution companies. You would find that maybe the highest that gets so much from the transmission company that gets its, allocated to them, and as well as the NEC being the mediator there, gives about maybe 600 and something megawatts. And so if that is it, what much has changed? The best that they will typically do, in my thinking, for any disco is to say, okay, I think I would allocate so much of this to the band A guys, and then I'll see how I'm going to play around. But again, what happens when generation in itself drops below, say, 4,000 megawatts that it's been, right? Or when it even drops below 3,000, or maybe there is, again, what we'll typically say is a shutdown across the nation. What happens at those points? They've just got to find a way to, manage the little that they have and see how it goes around. So that has a very great impact on how much they are able to give. You can't give what you don't have, and that's what really the discos are about.
So it actually strikes me that in a country where we have so much abundance of hydro, wind, sun, and coal and some other energy sources, we are still talking about these companies who actually have low generating capacity and low electricity capacity that they can distribute to those who are in need, be it corporate or households. So when we look at what Nigeria has in abundance and the limitations, what strategies could be employed to address the dissatisfaction that customers are feeling right now, those shortages in the electricity supply, and what needs to be done in terms of investments?
That's like a $1 million question, I will tell you, because it's like giving a silver bullet to the problems of the power sector. But I'll tell you, there is really nothing like that. But one major thing that we've identified over time within the power sector is the issue of liquidity, which is why a school of thought will tell you that, the tariff increase is one big solution to the problem, because it would mean more liquidity for people who operate within that sector. But I'll tell you no, because you've also mentioned the fact that we have several other sources, right? Again, it's about affordability. So when the economy in itself is not doing well, to my mind, there is only little that you can do. If you increase the tariff till till a million times, what's going to happen is that is the same resources within the economy that you continue to share around, and it could even impoverish some persons. So it's something that has to be holistic. As we touch on the problems within the power sector, it's got to find a way to impact on the manufacturing problems in Nigeria, such that we begin to export, that the exchange rate begins to get better, and then we find a solution turning around everything that we have within the nation. So really and truly, I will not tell you that there is a silver bullet to the problem that we have within the power sector, but I do believe that with the right policy in place and with a managed increase, I would say, to the tariff, to ensure that people who want power, get it, and they also get to pay for it in the fairest manner. One problem that you would see that still lingers on, even with the increase in tariff, is that people have not been metered. So it's going to be unfair for certain persons who are classified within Band A to continue to pay estimated billing, even in this regime. And then what happens to those who are in the other bands, in the Band B or to E, for instance? They get power at the same time, but they pay at a different rate. So much so that you don't give them for a certain number of hours, they still get power. So again, it's something that I believe government needs to step in and say, how do we want to address this problem over time? Do we want to have a 10-year plan or a 5-year plan to solving the problem? And we begin to phase it out one after the other. I'll begin to explore the other sources, the solar, for instance, the hydro, for instance, and all of the investment that is needed. Because again, it's really about how much investment we're able to engage into the sector to ensure that we actualize and explore all of the potent resources that are in there.
Well, Temitope Kolade, thank you so much for your time on the news.
Thanks for having me.